She arrived as a simple maid, but carried a past sealed in blood. He was an isolated millionaire, wrapped in guilt that no one ever forgave. What began with silent glances turned into a game of tension and desire. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave your comment saying where you listen from. The cutting wind of Oregon's southern coast carried the scent of salt and something older, darker. The dirt road wound between twisted pine trees until it reached the wrought iron gates of Blackwood Manor, where Emma Sullivan stopped the intercity bus that had brought her from Portland. At 22, she had already learned to distrust places that seemed too beautiful, and that property, with its Gothic towers emerging from the morning mist, definitely fell into that category. The cleaning agency had been vague with information. A 3-month job, generous payment, accommodation included. The client preferred complete discretion. No questions, no curiosity. Emma accepted because she needed the money, but also because there was a deeper reason, one she kept as a dangerous secret deep in her chest. 3 weeks ago, a brown envelope had appeared under her door in the small studio apartment she shared with 2 other girls in Portland. Inside, just one handwritten sentence in blue ink: "She died for something you need to know," and a silk handkerchief, delicate, embroidered with the initials E.B. Ellie Blackwood. The same name that appeared in her adoption documents as her biological sister, a sister she had never met, who had died when Emma was only 2 years old. The gate opened automatically as she approached, as if the house knew of her arrival. The uneven stone path led to the main entrance, where a tall man waited leaning against the doorframe. Lawrence Blackwood. Even from a distance, she could feel the intensity of his gaze, those grey eyes that seemed capable of unraveling secrets with a single glance. He wore a black cashmere sweater that highlighted the grey hair at his temples, and there was something predatory in his posture, like a feline observing potential prey. At 44, Lawrence carried the weight of a man who had seen too much, made too many choices, lost too much. "You must be Emma," he said when she approached. His deep, controlled voice. It wasn't a question. "I expected someone more experienced." "Experience isn't measured by age alone," she replied, keeping her tone respectful but firm. She had learned early that men like him tested boundaries from the first encounter. Lawrence sketched what might have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course not. Come in." The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. Colored stained glass filtered the rising sunlight, creating patterns that danced across the Italian marble floor. Double staircases curved toward the second floor, and family portraits in golden frames observed everything with solemn gazes. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. One portrait in particular caught her attention. A young woman with dark hair and green eyes looking too much like herself. "My half-sister Ellie," said Lawrence, following her gaze. His voice had acquired a different tone, darker. "Died 20 years ago. An accident." Emma nodded, feigning indifference, but her heart raced. It was her, it was really her sister. The resemblance was disturbing, as if she were looking at a more refined version of herself. "Your responsibilities are simple," continued Lawrence, walking through the spacious corridors. "General cleaning, organization of the main rooms. You'll have access to most of the house except the 3rd floor and the basement. My quarters are on the 2nd floor, east wing. I prefer not to be disturbed before 10 in the morning." They passed the library, an immense room with floor-to-ceiling, shelves filled with leather-bound books. One of the windows offered a view of the abandoned lighthouse at the edge of the property, a white tower that rose against the grey sky like an accusing finger. "Does the lighthouse work?" asked Emma. "There's no need. We don't receive visitors." "I see." The answer was dry, definitive. Lawrence stopped before a closed door. "This is the guest room where you'll stay. Far from my quarters, as I prefer." The room was Spartan but comfortable. A single bed, an antique wardrobe, a small desk by the window. Emma left her suitcase on the bed and turned to find Lawrence still standing at the door, watching her with an intensity that made her feel naked. "Do you have any other questions?" she asked. "Many, but I believe they will be answered with time." He made to leave, but stopped. "One thing, Emma. This house has memory. Sometimes the past insists on making itself present. If something bothers you, let me know immediately. After he left, Emma allowed herself to breathe deeply. The atmosphere of the mansion was oppressive, charged with an energy she couldn't identify. There were secrets buried in those walls, and she was determined to unearth them. That first night, as rain beat against the windows with unusual force, Emma discreetly explored the corridors. The house was a labyrinth of passages and interconnected rooms. On the second floor, she found the east wing where Lawrence had said his quarters were. A faint light leaked from under one of the doors, and she could hear the muffled sound of computer keys. She was almost back to her room when she noticed something strange. One of the corridor doors had scratch marks on the wood, as if someone had tried to force entry. And there was more. Small cameras installed in the corners of the ceiling, almost imperceptible. Lawrence Blackwood was watching her. The question was why? What exactly was he afraid she might discover? As she prepared for bed, Emma held Ellie's embroidered handkerchief between her fingers. "What happened to you here, sister?" she murmured to the delicate fabric. "And why does someone—" "Want me to know the truth?" Outside, the abandoned lighthouse remained dark against the stormy night, silent guardian of secrets that the ocean refused to swallow. The first days at Blackwood Manor passed in a strange and silent routine. Emma woke before dawn, when the fog still covered the gardens like a shroud, and began her work in the ground-floor rooms. The house revealed its secrets gradually, furniture covered with white sheets in rooms that clearly hadn't been used for years, portraits turned against the wall, drawers that seemed to have been sealed deliberately. Lawrence was a ghostly presence. She caught glimpses of him in the corridors, always wearing dark suits even inside the house, always with that controlled expression that revealed nothing. He didn't speak to her beyond what was strictly necessary, but Emma felt his eyes on her, constantly. When she cleaned the library, she could swear he watched her from the second-floor window. When she organized the dining room, she heard footsteps on the floor above, always stopping exactly where she was working. It was on the fourth day that she found the first note. A piece of cream-colored paper, carefully folded, left on the library table where she had worked the previous morning. The handwriting was elegant, masculine. "People leave marks in the places they pass through. You are leaving yours here." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't exactly a threat, but there was something disturbing about the message, as if Lawrence was cataloguing her presence, studying her like an interesting specimen. She folded the paper and put it in her pocket, deciding not to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. In the library, while dusting the old books, Emma discreetly looked for any reference to Ellie. Most of the volumes were world literature classics, philosophy treatises, some art history books. But on one of the highest shelves, she found a set of photo albums. Her pulse quickened when she saw that one of them had a date label, 1998-2004, the year of Ellie's death. She quickly looked around to make sure she was alone, then opened the album with trembling hands. The first pages showed elegant parties, formal dinners, a younger Lawrence smiling beside people she didn't recognize. But when she reached the middle of the album, she found what she was looking for. Ellie. Her sister appeared in several photos, always radiant, always beside Lawrence. There was a clear intimacy between them, a complicity that went beyond simple kinship. In one of the photos, she wore the same handkerchief that Emma now carried with her, and there was something in her eyes that made her shudder. Fear. Even smiling for the camera, Ellie seemed terrified. Interesting reading? Lawrence's deep voice made her jump and drop the album on the floor. The photos scattered across the Persian rug, and she quickly bent down to collect them, but he was faster. He picked up one of the images showing Ellie alone, in profile, looking out the window. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just cleaning and—" Emma stammered, feeling the blood rise to her cheeks. Lawrence studied the photo for a long moment, and when he raised his eyes to her, there was something different in his gaze. Vulnerability. Pain. She liked to stand there, watching the lighthouse. Said it was like a protective guardian. His voice was lower, less controlled. Of course it didn't protect anyone in the end. How did she die? The question came out before Emma could stop herself. Lawrence froze, and for a moment she thought he might explode in anger, but instead he just collected the remaining photos, with mechanical movements. An accident, a fall down the staircase during a storm. The floor was wet, she slipped. The words came out as if he had rehearsed them 1,000 times. It happened in the middle of the night. No one saw her fall. No one. Lawrence's grey eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her take a step back. No one, Emma. And I suggest that you don't worry about things that happened before you were born. But she had been born and Ellie was her sister. Lawrence didn't know that, of course, but the irony of the situation didn't go unnoticed. He was lying, she was sure. There were too many forced details in his explanation, too much rigidity in his posture. That afternoon, while cleaning the entrance hall, Emma carefully examined the marble staircase where Ellie had supposedly fallen. The steps were wide and had anti-slip strips. Even when wet, it would be difficult for someone to slip there accidentally. And there was more. Small dark stains at the base of the stairs, stains that seemed to have been cleaned many times, but were still visible if one knew where to look. At night, Emma was surprised by a violent storm. The winds made the mansion groan and sway, and the rain beat against the windows like desperate fists. She was in her room trying to read when she heard a strange sound coming from upstairs. Slow, dragging footsteps, as if someone was walking with difficulty. She left her room and silently climbed the stairs. The second floor was bathed in shadows, illuminated only by the sporadic flashes of lightning. The footsteps came from the east wing, where Lawrence's quarters supposedly were. But there was something wrong with the rhythm, something that didn't match the decisive walk she had observed over the last few days. She followed the sound to a half-open door at the end of the corridor. Through the crack she could see Lawrence, seated in a leather armchair, but he wasn't alone. There was a woman in the room with him, an ethereal figure who moved as if she were dancing. Emma held her breath and moved closer. It wasn't a woman. It was Lawrence alone talking to someone who wasn't there. His hands gestured in the air as if touching an invisible face, and his voice, though low, carried a desperate urgency. "I tried to protect her, you know that. I tried, but she wouldn't listen. She never listened to me." He paused as if listening to a reply. No, it wasn't my fault. You know it wasn't my fault." A particularly strong lightning bolt illuminated the room for an instant, and Emma saw that Lawrence was holding something in his hands. A photo. The same photo of Ellie that she had seen in the album. The floor creaked beneath her feet, and Lawrence turned abruptly toward the door. For a moment their eyes met through the crack, and Emma saw something that chilled her to the bone. Not anger or surprise, relief, as if he had been waiting for her. "Come in, Emma," he said, his voice strangely calm. "I think we've waited long enough." Emma hesitated at the threshold, her heart beating so hard she was sure Lawrence could hear it over the sound of the storm. The room was a study in shades of grey and gold, with shelves full of books, a fireplace that crackled softly, and that leather armchair where he remained seated, watching her with those eyes that seemed capable of reading thoughts. "You don't need to be afraid," he said, putting Ellie's photo in a drawer beside the armchair. "At least not of me." "I'm not afraid," she lied, entering the room with cautious steps. The truth was that she was afraid, yes, but not of the kind he imagined. She was afraid that her voice would betray her, that her hands would tremble, that he would discover why she was really there. Lawrence rose with fluid movements and walked to a crystal cabinet in the corner of the room. He poured 2 shots of an amber liquid into crystal glasses and offered one to her. "Scotch whiskey. Helps with the cold and the nerves." She accepted the glass but didn't drink. "Who are you talking to?" "Myself. A habit that develops when you live alone for a long time." He took a long sip and studied her over the rim of the glass. "Although lately I've had the feeling that I'm no longer alone in this house." "What do you mean?" "Objects that move from place to place. Doors that I swear I locked and find open in the morning. The lighthouse that sometimes seems to light up by itself, even without electrical power." Lawrence paused, his eyes fixed on hers. "And you, of course, your presence here has changed something." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Changed how? The house is restless, as if something is trying to awaken. He moved closer, and she could smell his aftershave mixed with whiskey and something deeper, more masculine. You look like her, you know? Like Ellie. It was the opening she needed. Maybe it's coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. Lawrence stopped a few inches from her, so close that she could see the small lines around his eyes, signs of sleepless nights and old worries, especially when they involve this house. Then tell me about her, about Ellie. Emma took a sip of the whiskey, feeling the liquid burn her throat. If I look so much like her, perhaps I should know who she was. Lawrence's face hardened. She was young, stubborn, believed she could fix things that had been broken for a long time. He returned to the armchair and sat down heavily. And she was too innocent to understand that some people don't want to be saved. People like you? People like our family. The answer came out more bitter than he probably intended. The Blackwoods have a long tradition of destroying everything they touch. Ellie thought she could break that cycle. Emma approached the fireplace, pretending to warm herself in the flames, but actually looking for a position where she could observe him better. And you? Do you believe you can break the cycle? Lawrence laughed, a humorless sound. I am the cycle, Emma. Everything I touch becomes corrupted or dies. Is that why you keep me at a distance with your rules and your cryptic notes? He raised his eyes, surprised. You found the notes. Hard not to find something that's deliberately left for me. She turned to face him. The question is, why? What do you want from me? For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the crackling of the firewood and the roar of the wind outside. When Lawrence finally spoke, his voice was almost inaudible. I want to understand why you're here. Really, don't tell me it was through the cleaning agency, because I know that's a lie. I hired you directly. Emma's heart stopped. What? There is no agency. It was me who placed that ad in the newspaper, specifically formulated to attract someone like you. Young, alone, without many family ties. Lawrence got up and walked to the window, looking in the direction of the lighthouse. What I didn't expect was that you would look so much like her. Emma felt her legs weaken. It had been a trap from the beginning. But a trap for what? Why did you do that? Because 20 years ago I made a mistake that haunts me every night, that makes me see shadows where they shouldn't exist, that makes me hear voices that should be silent. He rested his forehead on the cold glass of the window. And I thought that perhaps bringing someone new here, someone who didn't know the story, I could silence the ghosts. What ghosts? Lawrence turned, and for the first time since she arrived, he seemed completely vulnerable. Ellie didn't die in an accident, Emma. She was murdered. The whiskey glass slipped from Emma's hands and shattered. On the floor, the golden liquid spreading across the carpet like blood. What are you saying? I'm saying that someone killed my half-sister in this house 20 years ago, and I've spent all this time protecting the murderer. The words came out as if they were being torn from his throat. And now that you're here with that face, with that presence that awakens everything I tried to bury, I can't live with that lie anymore. Emma bent down to pick up the pieces of glass, more to gain time to process the information than out of any concern for cleanliness. Who? She asked without raising her eyes. Who killed her? My mother. The two words fell between them like a bomb. Emma slowly raised her head, meeting Lawrence's eyes. There was pain there, but also something more dangerous, relief, as if he could finally share the weight he had carried for 2 decades. Helen Blackwood, a brilliant, cruel woman, completely incapable of tolerating anyone who threatened her position in the family. Lawrence returned to the armchair but didn't sit. Ellie had discovered some questionable family businesses, money laundering, bribery, some worse things. She came to me, said she was going to expose everything. And you tried to stop her? I tried to protect her. I said we could resolve things internally, that she didn't need to involve the authorities. Lawrence ran his hands through his hair. But she was stubborn, said the Blackwood family had... already caused too much harm to the world. So your mother killed her to silence her. During a violent argument on the staircase, Ellie hit her head on the marble. My mother called me, hysterical, saying it had been an accident. When I arrived here, I found Ellie dead, and my mother trying to clean up the blood. Emma felt nausea rising in her throat, and you helped her cover it up. I was young, in love with a woman who didn't love me back, desperately trying to keep my family together. Lawrence laughed bitterly, and my mother knew exactly how to manipulate me. She said that if the truth came out, it wouldn't be just her who would be destroyed. I would also be investigated for the family business. Where is she now? Committed to a private psychiatric clinic. She developed early-onset dementia a few years after Ellie's death. The doctor said it might have been caused by guilt. Lawrence finally sat down, seeming to have aged 10 years during the conversation. I visit her once a month. Most of the time she doesn't recognize me. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with revelations and old pain. Outside, the storm was subsiding, but inside the room, a different storm was just beginning. "Why are you telling me this?" asked Emma, her voice barely above a whisper. Lawrence looked her directly in the eyes. "Because you have the right to know, and because for the first time in 20 years, I've found someone who might be able to forgive me." Lawrence's words echoed in the room like a confession that couldn't be undone. Emma felt the world spin around her, the revelations colliding, against the anger she had carried for so many years. Her sister. Her sister had been murdered in this house, and the man before her had spent 20 years protecting the murderer. Forgiveness. The word came out like a sharp blade. "You want me to forgive you for covering up the murder of my sister?" Lawrence froze, the whiskey glass stopping halfway to his mouth. "You're... what?" Emma rose abruptly, all the pain and fury she had harbored for years exploding like a broken dam. "Ellie was my sister, Lawrence, my older sister. That handkerchief you saw her wearing in the photos, I have it with me. Someone sent it to me, along with a note saying she died for something I needed to know." Lawrence's face lost all color. He placed the glass on the side table with trembling hands and rose slowly as if the weight of the revelation was physical. "That's impossible. Ellie had no family. She grew up in orphanages, just like me." Emma pulled the silk handkerchief from her pocket, the delicate fabric trembling between her fingers. "We were separated when I was 2 years old. She was adopted first, by a rich family who returned her 3 years later claiming she was too problematic. I never knew what happened to her after that." Lawrence approached, extending his hand to touch the handkerchief, but Emma backed away. "Don't you dare. You have no right to touch anything that belonged to her. Emma, He stopped, running his hands over his face. If I had known, if I had the slightest idea, what would you have done differently? Would you still have protected your mother? Would you still have lied to the police?" Her voice rose an octave, years of pain and abandonment manifesting in every word. "My sister died alone in this house, murdered by a woman you chose to protect instead of the truth. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the complexity of the situation." "Don't give me excuses," Emma shouted, tears finally beginning to fall. "She was 22, Lawrence, the same age I am now. She was brave enough to do the right thing, to expose the rot in your family, and you killed her for it." Lawrence took a step back as if he had been slapped. "I didn't kill her. I tried to protect her." "Protect her?" Emma laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You betrayed her. You chose the side of money and power instead of the side of justice. And then you spent 20 years playing the victim, as if you were the one who suffered most from the situation." The silence that followed was charged with electric tension. Lawrence remained motionless, looking at her as if seeing a ghost. Perhaps he was. Perhaps Emma was really Ellie's ghost, returning to haunt his guilty conscience. "Who sent the note?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. "I don't know. It came anonymously." Emma wiped the tears with the back of her hand. "But someone knew the truth. Someone wanted me to come here." "Vincent," murmured Lawrence. "It has to have been Vincent Reynolds." "Who is Vincent?" "My ex-partner. The only one who knew all the details of what happened that night." Lawrence began to pace back and forth, his mind clearly working. We had a falling out a few months ago about some business. He threatened to expose various family secrets if I didn't give in to his demands. What kind of demands? Money. A lot of money. And part of the family businesses. Lawrence stopped in front of the window, looking at the lighthouse that remained dark in the darkness. I refused. I thought he was bluffing. Apparently, he wasn't. Emma approached, but kept enough distance to escape if necessary. He wants you to suffer, and using me for that is the perfect revenge. Maybe, but that doesn't change the fact that you have a right to the truth. Lawrence turned to face her, and I have an obligation to tell it regardless of the consequences. Very noble of you, considering it's been over 20 years. Emma, I know you hate me. I know you have every right to hate me. But you need to understand one thing. He took a step in her direction, his grey eyes intense in the half-light. I loved Ellie, not as a brother, but as a man. She was the only person in this world who saw me as more than just the heir to a dirty fortune. The confession hit her, like a punch to the stomach. You were in love with her, desperately, and she knew. She used that to try to convince me to do the right thing, to expose the family's crimes. Lawrence laughed bitterly. In the end, she succeeded. It just took 20 years. So that's what Vincent knew that would destroy you. Not just the cover-up of the murder, but the fact that you were in love with your half-sister. Among other things, yes. Lawrence moved a step closer. But there's something else you need to know, Emma, something that changes everything. What? Ellie was pregnant when she died. The world stopped. Emma felt her legs weaken and had to support herself on the armchair to avoid falling. Pregnant? 2 months along. The autopsy report mentioned it, but it was omitted from the official report. Lawrence's voice was so low she could barely hear it. My mother didn't know when she killed her. We found out afterward. The baby. Was it yours? Lawrence closed his eyes as if the question caused physical pain. I don't know. Ellie never told me who the father was. In fact, she didn't even tell me about the pregnancy. I only discovered it in the report. Emma let herself fall into the armchair, the shock leaving her speechless. Her sister hadn't died alone. There had been a child, a nephew or niece she would never know, who would never have the chance to live. That's why you brought me here, she said finally, because I'm not just similar to Ellie. I'm all that's left of her. In part, yes. Lawrence knelt beside the armchair, his eyes at the same level as hers. But also because I needed to tell someone. 20 years carrying this secret destroyed me inside, and when I saw you, it was as if Ellie was giving me one last chance to do the right thing. Emma looked at him, really looked, for the first time, since she had arrived at the mansion. She saw the lines of worry around his eyes, the constant tension in his shoulders, the way his hands trembled slightly. This man had been destroyed by guilt as much as she had been destroyed by loss. What happens now? She asked. Now you decide, said Lawrence. You can leave, tell the police what you know, see me imprisoned for the rest of my life, or we can find out together who really wants the truth to come out and why. He extended his hand hesitantly. I can't undo what I did, Emma, but I can try to honor Ellie's memory in the only way I know how. She looked at the extended hand, fighting, against all the instincts that told her to run. But there was something in his proposal that intrigued her, and despite all the anger and pain, she could see that Lawrence was being sincere, perhaps for the first time in 20 years. All right, she said finally, but didn't take his hand, but with one condition. Which? No lies, no half-truths. If we're going to do this, you tell me absolutely everything you know about Ellie's death. All the details, all the people involved, all the secrets your family buried. Lawrence nodded. Everything. Outside, as if responding to the agreement between them, the abandoned lighthouse flashed once in the darkness, a ghostly light that lasted only a second before disappearing again. The following days unfolded in a strangely intimate and tense atmosphere. Lawrence kept his promise of complete transparency, revealing every sordid detail of the Blackwood Empire. They spent hours in the library, surrounded by documents, photos, and records that he had obsessively kept for 2 decades. Emma discovered that her sister hadn't been just a naive idealist, but a meticulous investigator who had documented years of family crimes. "She kept everything here," said Lawrence, opening an old chest that was hidden behind a false bookshelf. Bank documents, recorded conversations, compromising photographs. Ellie was building a solid case against the entire organization. Emma took one of the folders, leafing through records of suspicious transactions and correspondences that revealed a complex network of corruption. "Why didn't she take this directly to the police?" "Because half the local police were in our pocket," Lawrence replied, sitting on the floor beside her. Ellie knew she needed irrefutable evidence and contacts at higher levels of the federal government. And did she have those contacts? She was working on it. She had approached a prosecutor in Washington, a man named Dr. Henry Mitchell. He was incorruptible, had made a career fighting financial crimes of powerful families. Emma found a letter with the letterhead of the federal prosecutor's office, dated 2 weeks before Ellie's death. The text was formal, but the subtext was clear. Dr. Mitchell was interested in what she had to offer. "Did your mother know about this?" "Eventually, yes. Ellie was careless in a phone conversation. My mother had the habit of recording all calls that came in and out of the house." Lawrence ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that Emma had noticed he made whenever he was particularly agitated. When Helen heard Ellie scheduling a meeting with Mitchell for the following week, she knew it was over for all of us. So she confronted her. More than that, she set a trap. Lawrence stood up and walked to the window, as he always did when the conversation became difficult. "My mother called Ellie for a conversation in the library, claiming she wanted to negotiate, said she was willing to make a deal to provide some information in exchange for immunity for the family." And Ellie believed her? Ellie wanted to believe. Despite everything, she still had hope that she could save the people she loved. His voice became lower, "including me." There was something in the way Lawrence said these words that made Emma look at him more carefully. In recent weeks, she had begun to notice small details about him that had initially gone unnoticed. The way his eyes softened when he talked about Ellie, how his hands became agitated when he was nervous, the manner in which he always maintained physical distance from her, as if it were too dangerous to get close. "Lawrence," she said softly, "what exactly happened that night?" He turned and she saw that there were tears in his eyes. "I was traveling in Seattle, closing a deal that today I know was just an excuse to keep me away from home. My mother had planned everything carefully." "But you came back." "She called me at 2 in the morning, hysterical, saying that Ellie had fallen down the stairs, that it had been an accident. I drove 5 hours in the rain to get here and find—" He stopped, breathing deeply. "I found Ellie at the foot of the staircase with blood on her head and my mother trying to clean the stains on the marble." "Was she dead?" "Not immediately." The confession came out as a whisper. "She was still breathing when I arrived. She opened her eyes, recognized me, tried to speak." Emma felt her heart stop. "What did she say?" "She said my name. And then, 'Protect the baby.'" Lawrence leaned against the wall as if his legs could no longer support him. "That's how I found out about the pregnancy. Her last words were about protecting a child I didn't even know existed." "And you didn't call an ambulance?" "My mother said it was too late, that if we called doctors there would be questions, investigations, that we would ruin 3 lives trying to save one that was already lost." Lawrence closed his eyes. "Ellie died in my arms 15 minutes after I arrived home." The silence in the library was oppressive. Emma processed the information, feeling a mixture of anger and something more complicated toward the man in front of her. He had made terrible choices, but she was beginning to understand that he had been manipulated by a woman who hadn't hesitated to murder to protect her secrets. "You said Vincent Reynolds knew about all this. How?" "He was my best friend at the time. More than that, he was like a brother." Lawrence returned to her vicinity but maintained a respectful distance. "I was destroyed by guilt, couldn't handle it alone. I told him everything a few days later." "And he never said anything?" "For 20 years, no. Vincent helped me keep the secret, even helped me with the practical details. It was he who suggested, "We bury Ellie in the family's private cemetery," who helped create the story about the accident. Then why does he want to expose everything now? Lawrence hesitated, and Emma realized she had reached another layer of truth. Because he was also in love with Ellie. The revelation hit her like another blow. Both of you? Vincent met her first. They dated briefly before she moved here. When she arrived and began investigating the family, Vincent tried to dissuade her through me. Lawrence sat in the leather armchair looking exhausted. He thought that if I could win her over, she would give up the investigation, but it didn't work. Worse than that, Ellie realized what was happening and was furious, said that we were both the same, that we used our feelings as weapons to manipulate her. Lawrence covered his face with his hands. The last argument I had with her was about this. She accused me of being in love only to protect the family business. And was it true? Lawrence raised his head and looked her directly in the eyes. At the beginning, maybe, but afterward I really fell in love with her courage, with her determination, with the way she saw the world. He paused. With the way she saw me. How did she see you? As someone who could be better. As someone worth saving. Lawrence got up and walked to where Emma was sitting on the floor, surrounded by Ellie's documents. It's the same way you look at me sometimes. Emma felt a warmth rise up her neck. In recent weeks, as she discovered the truth about her sister's death, something had changed between her and Lawrence. The initial anger had given way to something more complicated, a mutual understanding that she wasn't prepared to face. "Don't compare me to her," she said, but her voice lacked the conviction of before. "I'm not comparing, I'm recognizing." Lawrence knelt beside her, so close that she could feel the heat of his body. "You have the same strength that Ellie had, the same determination to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. Lawrence, I know it's complicated. I know you have every right to hate me for the rest of your life." He extended his hand, hesitantly, and this time she didn't pull away when he touched her face. "But I need you to know that these last weeks, getting to know you, discovering who you are, have been the first in 20 years that have made me feel that perhaps I can be forgiven." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the inner conflict tearing at her chest. All her convictions, all the anger she had nurtured for weeks, were dissolving. Under his gentle touch, it was wrong. It was a betrayal of Ellie's memory, but it was also the most real thing she had felt in her life. "This is madness," she murmured. "I know." Lawrence brought his face closer to hers, his warm breath against her skin. "But maybe a little madness is exactly what we need to fix 20 years of destructive sanity." When their lips touched, it was with a gentleness that contrasted with all the tension accumulated between them. It wasn't the kiss of a predator conquering his prey, but of two survivors recognizing each other in the darkness. Emma allowed herself for a moment to forget all the pain and simply feel, but the moment was interrupted by a sound that made them separate abruptly, the doorbell of the main entrance, echoing through the empty house like an omen. The doorbell echoed again through the mansion, more insistent this time. Lawrence and Emma separated quickly, the moment of intimacy dissolving like smoke. There was something ominous about that sound, an urgency that made both of them rise instinctively. "Who could it be at this hour?" murmured Emma, looking out the window. It was almost 10 at night, and the rain had started again, transforming the property into a dark and hostile blur. Lawrence was already heading for the door, but stopped when he saw the tension on her face. "It's probably Vincent. He has the habit of showing up unannounced when he wants something." "Are you going to answer?" "We have no choice. If it really is him, pretending we're not here will only make him more suspicious." Lawrence straightened his shirt and ran his hand through his hair. "Stay here. And if you hear anything strange, use the secret passage behind the bookshelf to leave the house." "What secret passage?" "The third bookshelf on the left. Push the Shakespeare books and it opens." Lawrence stopped at the library door. "Emma, promise me you'll leave here if things get dangerous." She nodded, but they both knew it was a lie. After weeks of searching for answers about her sister, She wasn't simply going to run away now. Lawrence went down the stairs, and Emma followed him discreetly, keeping to the shadows of the second floor where she could hear the conversation but not be seen. The sound of the heavy door opening echoed through the entrance hall, followed by a male voice she didn't recognize. "Lawrence, my old friend, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." The voice was smooth, polite, but there was a predatory quality to it that made Emma shiver. "Vincent Reynolds," she presumed. "Vincent, it's late for a social call." Lawrence's voice was controlled, but Emma could detect the underlying tension. "Ah, but this isn't a social call, is it? It's a reckoning that should have happened a long time ago." Emma moved closer to the balustrade, trying to see the visitor. Vincent was a man of medium height, dark hair with grey strands, wearing an expensive suit that was soaked by the rain. There was something vaguely familiar about his appearance, but she couldn't identify what. "Come in, then. Let's talk in the office." "Actually, I prefer that we talk right here. This hall has an appropriate symbolism, don't you think? It was here that your dear Ellie took her last steps." Lawrence stiffened. "Vincent, did you really think you could fool me forever? That I would never discover your little trap?" Vincent walked slowly to the foot of the staircase, running his hand over the marble railing. "When I learned that you had hired a new employee, a young woman who suspiciously resembled our deceased Ellie, I was intrigued." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. Just as you know that Emma Sullivan isn't just a cleaner looking for a job." Vincent looked directly upward, and Emma was sure he could see her hidden in the shadows. "Hello, dear. Why don't you come down and join the conversation? After all, it's about you." Emma hesitated for a moment, but knew there was no point in hiding anymore. She descended the stairs slowly, keeping her distance from both Lawrence and Vincent. "Much better," said Vincent, studying her with eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail. "The resemblance is truly impressive. When I first saw you in town, weeks ago, I thought I was seeing a ghost." "You were following her?" Lawrence took a step in front of Emma, instinctively protective. "Following is a strong word. Let's say I was observing. I wanted to be sure my suspicion was correct before acting." "What suspicion?" asked Emma, finding the courage to speak. Vincent smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes. "That you are Ellie's sister of—" "Of course, it wasn't difficult to discover once I knew your full name. A few phone calls to the right orphanages, a small bribe to a corrupt public official, and voila. Emma Sullivan, 2 years younger than Ellie Blackwood, separated from her as a child. It was you who sent the note, it wasn't a question. Guilty. Although I must admit, I didn't expect you to come so easily. I thought I would need more persuasion." Lawrence moved closer to Emma. "What do you want, Vincent?" "What I've always wanted. Justice for Ellie." Vincent began to slowly climb the staircase, forcing Lawrence and Emma to back up. "You two think you've discovered everything, don't you? That you've unraveled all the secrets of the Blackwood family?" "We know that Helen killed Ellie," said Emma. "Ah, but do you know why?" Vincent stopped in the middle of the staircase, exactly where, according to Lawrence, Ellie had fallen. "Do you know the real reason that led a mother to murder her stepdaughter?" Lawrence frowned. "To protect the family business. To prevent Ellie from exposing the crimes." Partially correct, but incomplete. Vincent pulled an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket. "The truth is much more personal than that." He opened the envelope and removed a series of photographs, extending them so both could see. The images were in black and white, clearly taken with a long-distance camera. They showed Ellie and Lawrence together, but they weren't platonic. Photographs. They were intimate, compromising. "Helen hired a private investigator to follow Ellie," explained Vincent. "She suspected there was something between you two and wanted proof." Emma took one of the photos, feeling nausea rise in her throat. It showed Lawrence and Ellie passionately kissing in the mansion's garden, his hands entwined in her hair. "That doesn't prove anything," said Lawrence, but his voice lacked conviction. "No? Then perhaps this will prove it." Vincent handed over another photo. This one showed the two of them leaving a hotel in Portland, clearly after a night together. "My God," murmured Emma. "You were lovers." "Helen discovered the affair a few weeks before Ellie's death," continued Vincent, ignoring Lawrence's evident discomfort. "But that wasn't what made her furious enough to kill." "Then what was it?" Emma's voice was barely audible. Vincent smiled again, that cold smile that warmed nothing. The fact that the baby Ellie was expecting was definitely Lawrence's, and Ellie was planning to tell the federal prosecutor about this as additional proof of the family's moral corruption. The silence that followed was absolute. Emma looked at Lawrence, seeing the truth written on his pale face. He hadn't just lied about not knowing if he was the baby's father. He had known from the beginning. "You lied to me," she said, her voice trembling with anger and disappointment. "Emma, I can explain." "Explain what? That you were sleeping with my sister while pretending to protect her? That you got her pregnant and then allowed your mother to kill her to protect your own dirty secret?" "It wasn't like that." "But it was exactly like that," interrupted Vincent. "And there's more. Lawrence didn't just know about the pregnancy, he begged Ellie to get an abortion. Said a child would destroy both of them socially." Emma felt the world spin around her. Everything she had begun to feel. For Lawrence, all the understanding and even the beginning of forgiveness crumbled in an instant. He wasn't just an accomplice in her sister's murder. He was the reason she had died. "Ellie refused to abort," continued Vincent, clearly savoring every word. "Said the child was proof that something good could come from the Blackwood family." Helen overheard one of the arguments between them and decided that the only way to protect the family's reputation was to eliminate both Ellie and the baby. Stop," said Lawrence, his voice broken. "Just stop." "Why should I stop? After 20 years keeping your dirty secrets, the time for truth has finally come." Vincent descended a few steps, approaching Emma. "And you, my dear, are going to help me ensure that Lawrence pays for everything he did." "How?" she asked, unable to take her eyes off Lawrence's devastated face. "Simple. You will testify that Lawrence confessed the murder to you. You will tell the authorities that he killed Ellie in a fit of rage when she refused to abort. But that's a lie. It was Helen who killed her. Helen is senile, committed to a psychiatric clinic. She can't be tried for her crimes." Vincent placed his hand on Emma's shoulder, a gesture that seemed gentle but had a possessive quality. "But Lawrence can and will." Lawrence raised his head, and Emma saw tears in his eyes. "If that's what you want, Vincent, I confess. But leave Emma out of this. She has nothing to do with the sins of the past." "Ah, but she has everything to do with it. She's the only credible witness we have." Vincent smiled at Emma. "And conveniently, she has every reason in the world to want to see you destroyed." Emma looked between the two men, feeling trapped in a web of manipulation and revenge that had been woven long before she arrived. But one thing was clear. Her search for justice for Ellie was just beginning. The tension in the entrance hall was palpable. 3 people trapped in a triangle of truths and lies that stretched back 2 decades. Emma felt as if she were being torn apart inside, each new revelation destroying a bit more of her ability to discern between victims and villains. "You're asking me to lie," she said to Vincent, her voice firmer than she felt. "I'm asking you to deliver justice. Lawrence may not have held the knife, but he created all the circumstances that led to your sister's death." Vincent moved closer to her, and Emma could smell the rain and something darker on his clothes. "He got her pregnant, pressured her to abort, and when she refused, his family solved the problem in the most definitive way possible." Lawrence took a step forward. "Emma, don't listen to him. Vincent has his own motivations for wanting to destroy me." "What motivations?" she asked, although part of her didn't want to know anything more. Each revealed truth only made everything more complicated, more painful. "Tell her, Vincent," said Lawrence, his voice laden with bitterness. "Tell her about the money you stole from the company, about the clients you deceived using the family name, about why I really had to end our partnership." Vincent laughed, but there was a tension in his posture that wasn't there before. Always dramatic, our Lawrence, always trying to divert attention from his own crimes. "It's not a crime, it's the truth. You blackmailed me for years using the secret of Ellie's death to cover your own wrongdoings. Lawrence turned to Emma. He's not here for justice. He's here because he needs money to flee the country before his own crimes are discovered. That's a lie, said Vincent, but Emma noticed that his hands trembled slightly. Is it? Then why didn't you go to the police 20 years ago when you learned the truth? Why did you wait until now? Lawrence continued, gaining confidence. Because you were using the information to control me, to ensure that I would cover your losses and your scams. Emma looked between the two men, realizing that she was being used as a pawn in a game much more complex than she had imagined. But there was something that Vincent had said that wouldn't leave her mind. Wait, she said, raising her hand to silence both of them. Vincent, you said that you saw me when I arrived in town weeks ago. You said that you followed me. Yes, but I never came to this town before accepting the job here. I came directly from Portland. Emma felt a piece of the puzzle falling into place. How did you see me weeks before if I only arrived a few days ago? Vincent hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, Emma saw the truth. You lied about sending me the note, didn't you? You didn't know who I was until I showed up here. Emma, began Vincent, who really sent me that note? She turned to Lawrence. Who else knew about Ellie being my sister? Lawrence looked at her. Her for a long moment, and she saw something changing in his face, an understanding, a revelation that was hitting him at the same moment it hit her. Only one person, he said slowly. Someone who had access to Ellie's adoption records. Someone who knew all the intimate details of her life. Who? Asked Emma, although a dark part of her mind was already beginning to suspect. Dr. Helen Blackwood, said a female voice from the entrance of the house. Everyone turned to see an elderly woman standing at the door, wearing a dark raincoat and leaning on an elegant cane. Her grey hair was perfectly arranged despite the storm outside, and her eyes, the same grey eyes as Lawrence, shone with a lucidity that completely contrasted with the dementia that had supposedly consumed her. Mother, murmured Lawrence, the colour completely draining from his face. What are you doing here? How did you get out of the clinic? The same way I always get out when I want to, my dear son. Money and influence still open many doors. Helen entered, the house closing the door behind her. Even for a supposedly senile woman, Emma felt as if the floor was disappearing beneath her feet. You're not sick. Dementia is a very convenient condition, don't you think? It allows a person to do terrible things and then be declared unaccountable. Helen smiled, and there was a cold cruelty in that expression that made Emma shudder. It's also useful for observing how people behave when they think you can't understand or judge them. It was you who sent me the note, said Emma, more a statement than a question. Of course it was me. It wasn't difficult to discover about you once I started looking. Ellie used to talk about a little sister she had lost. In the first years she lived here. Helen walked slowly to the foot of the staircase, exactly where her stepdaughter had died. I always wondered if she would grow up to be as problematic as Ellie. Why? Emma's voice was almost inaudible. Why did you bring me here? Because my son could never overcome the guilt over the death of his dear Ellie. 20 years flagellating himself, isolating himself, wasting his life in useless remorse. Helen looked at Lawrence with something that could be maternal love if it weren't so possessive. I thought that perhaps, seeing you, he would finally be able to move on. Or completely destroy himself, murmured Vincent. That was also an acceptable possibility, admitted Helen coldly. Either way, Lawrence would be forced to make a final choice about his future. Lawrence found his voice. You murdered Ellie, and then spent 20 years letting me believe I was an accomplice. You made me lie to protect you, carry the guilt, live like a ghost. I protected our family, Helen replied. Protected you. That girl was going to destroy everything we built, was going to send you to prison along with her when she exposed our business. And the baby? You killed my child too. A bastard who would grow up to blackmail us for the rest of our lives, just as the mother was doing. Helen showed not even a blink of remorse. It was a clean solution to a complex problem. Emma felt a white-hot fury spreading through her chest. You're a monster. I am a survivor and a mother who protects her family. Helen turned to her, studying her as if she were an interesting specimen. The question now, dear Emma, is what we're going to do with you." "What do you mean?" asked Lawrence, taking a protective step in front of Emma. Well, she knows too. Much now, doesn't she? And unlike Vincent here, who can be bought, or you, who can be manipulated by guilt, Emma has purely emotional motivations. Helen smiled again, that icy smile. Emotions are dangerous. They make people make irrational decisions. Vincent, who had remained silent during the entire revelation, finally spoke. "Helen, this has gone too far. One death was enough. It was enough 20 years ago. Now we have a different problem." Helen pulled something from inside her coat, and Emma felt her blood freeze when she saw the small but definitely lethal revolver in the elderly woman's hand. And problems require definitive solutions. Blackwood Manor, which had witnessed a murder 20 years before, was about to see its history repeat itself. But this time, Emma would not be a passive victim. 20 years of anger for a sister she never knew, weeks of painful discoveries, and the realization that she had fallen in love with the man she had judged guilty of Ellie's death crystallized into a fierce determination. "No," she said, surprising everyone, including herself. "Enough." Emma's no echoed through the hall like a war cry. Helen arched an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the sudden change in the young woman who until then had seemed lost and vulnerable. "Excuse me, dear. I said no. You're not going to kill anyone else. You're not going to destroy more lives to protect your dirty secrets." Emma took a step forward, ignoring the gun pointed at her. "You killed my sister. You killed my nephew or niece who never got to be born. You destroyed your own son's life for 20 years. And now you want to kill me too." "Emma, don't do this," murmured Lawrence, trying to put himself between her and the gun, but she gently pushed him aside. "No, Lawrence. I've spent my whole life being protected, being controlled, being kept in the dark. First in the orphanage, then by the fears I created myself." She kept her eyes fixed on Helen. Ellie was brave. She confronted this corrupt family, even knowing she could die for it. It's the least tribute I can pay to her. Helen tightened her grip around the gun. "Courage or stupidity, the result is the same. Dead people can't testify against anyone. But they can inspire others to continue their fight." Emma continued approaching, each step deliberate despite the terror she felt. "Do you think that by killing everyone who knows the truth you'll be able to erase what you did? There are more people involved in this now." "What people?" Helen's voice had lost some of its coldness, a note of uncertainty infiltrating. "Dr. Henry Mitchell, the prosecutor Ellie was going to seek out. Do you think he forgot the young woman who had scheduled a meeting with him and then mysteriously died?" Emma was bluffing, but she saw Helen's expression falter slightly. "I contacted him before I came here. I told him about the note, about my suspicions. If anything happens to me, he'll investigate." "Lies, are they? Do you want to risk it?" Emma stopped a few meters from Helen. 20 years ago you managed to cover up the death of an orphan no one would look for. But now there are witnesses. Vincent knows everything. Lawrence has confessed everything to me. And I've documented all these confessions." Lawrence looked at her in surprise but remained silent, perceiving the psychological game she was trying to play. "Where are these documentations?" asked Helen, but her voice betrayed growing nervousness. "Audio recordings, photographs of the documents we found in the library, copies of the records Ellie had collected, all stored in a safe place, with instructions to be sent to the authorities. If anything happens to me." Emma took a deep breath. "The difference between you and Ellie is that she tried to do the right thing by working within the system. I don't have those illusions." Vincent, who had observed the entire exchange in silence, finally spoke. "Helen, she's right. Even if you kill us here today, it won't end. There are too many people involved now." "Vincent is right," said Lawrence, finding courage in Emma's determination. "Mother, this needs to stop. You can't continue killing to protect secrets. Eventually the truth always comes out." "The truth?" Helen laughed, but the sound was hysterical now. "You talk about truth as if it was something pure, something noble. The truth is that we are a family of criminals. The truth is that Lawrence slept with his half-sister and got her pregnant. The truth is that you are all as guilty as I am." "No," said Emma firmly. "Lawrence made mistakes, but you are a murderer. Vincent may have blackmailed and stolen, but you took lives. There's a difference." Helen raised the gun, pointing directly at Emma's chest. "Difference doesn't matter when you're dead." It was at that moment that Lawrence acted. Without hesitation, he threw himself in front of Emma. At the exact instant, Helen pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the mansion like thunder, and Lawrence staggered backward, a red stain spreading across his white shirt. "Lawrence!" Emma held him as he fell, her hands immediately covered in blood. "No, no, no. It's okay," he murmured, although his breathing was labored. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're bleeding." Tears ran down her face as she pressed her hands against the wound in his shoulder. "Why did you do that?" "Because I love you," he said simply. "Because you reminded me that there is something worth dying for." Helen still held the gun, but seemed in shock at what she had done. "Lawrence, but I didn't mean to. You shouldn't have." "I should have done this 20 years ago," said Lawrence, leaning on Emma. "I should have protected Ellie from you, instead of protecting you from her." Vincent approached Helen cautiously. "Helen, give me the gun, it's over." But Helen wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on the blood that trickled through Emma's fingers, an expression of horror taking over her face. "I didn't want to hurt you, Lawrence. I never wanted to hurt you." "Then stop now," he said, struggling to remain conscious. "Hand over the gun and let's resolve this once and for all." For a moment, it seemed that Helen would obey. Her hand with the gun began to lower, and Vincent moved closer, ready to disarm her. But then she heard something that made them all freeze, sirens approaching in the distance. "You called the police," she said, her voice returning to the icy tone of before. "I didn't," began Emma, but then she remembered. Before coming down, to investigate the sound of the doorbell, she had sent a message to an emergency number she had programmed into her cell phone as a precaution. An automatic message with the location of the mansion and a request to check on her well-being. Helen also realized the truth on Emma's face. Clever. Ellie would be proud. She raised the gun again, but this time aimed it at herself. "But I'm not going to prison. I won't spend my last years being judged by people who never understood what it really means to protect a family." "Mother, no!" shouted Lawrence, trying to stand despite the pain. "I've always protected you, Lawrence, even when you didn't want to be protected." Helen smiled, and for the first time, Emma saw something like genuine love in her eyes. "Now you can have the life you always wanted. Free from guilt, free from secrets, free from me." The second gunshot echoed through the mansion exactly when the blue and red lights of the police cars began to illuminate the windows. Helen Blackwood fell in the same place where she had murdered Ellie 20 years before, the circle of violence finally closing. Emma held Lawrence tighter, her tears falling on his pale face. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please, stay with me." "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, raising his bloodied hand to touch her face. "For the first time in 20 years, I have a reason to stay." The sirens grew louder, and Vincent ran to open the door for the approaching paramedics. But in the bloodied hall of Blackwood Manor, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the promise of an uncertain future, Lawrence and Emma kissed as if they were sealing a pact that not even death could break. 3 months later, Emma was sitting in the garden of Blackwood Manor, watching Lawrence slowly recover from his wounds. His shoulder still hadn't completely healed, but the doctors assured that there would be no permanent sequelae. The emotional scars, those would take longer to heal. The police investigation had revealed the full extent of the Blackwood family's crimes. With Helen dead, and Lawrence fully cooperating with the authorities, secrets buried for decades finally came to light. Vincent had also confessed his own transgressions, but in exchange for his cooperation as a witness, he had received only a suspended sentence and community service. "Dr. Mitchell called today," said Lawrence, approaching her with 2 cups of coffee. His movements were still careful, protecting the injured shoulder. "The court accepted our proposal." Emma took the cup, inhaling the rich aroma that she had learned to associate with the tranquil mornings they now shared. "All the properties, all of them, The mansion will be transformed into a support center for orphans who are leaving the system. The lighthouse grounds will become a memorial for victims of domestic violence. Lawrence sat beside her on the garden bench they had installed with a view of the ocean, and the rest of the assets will be used to create a fund for investigating cold cases of missing persons. It was poetic justice, thought Emma, the fortune built on crimes and secrets being used to help people who, like Ellie, had been forgotten by the system. And Vincent? How is he handling the new life? Better than I expected. Apparently carrying guilt for 20 years is heavier than he imagined. Lawrence took a sip of coffee, his eyes lost on the horizon where the lighthouse, now restored and functioning, cast its comforting light. He started working with an NGO in Seattle, said he wants to do something useful with the time he has left. Emma nodded, satisfied. In the months that followed the terrible night in the mansion's hall, she had learned that redemption was possible, even for people who had made terrible mistakes. Vincent had shown himself to be genuinely remorseful, and his complete cooperation with the authorities had helped clarify not only Ellie's death, but several other crimes of the Blackwood family. "I received an interesting call yesterday," she said, playing with the handle of the cup. "From the orphanage where Ellie and I grew up." Lawrence turned to her, curious. "About what?" "They want to offer me a job. Social worker, working specifically with children who have siblings separated by the system." Emma smiled slightly. "It seems our story reached the ears of the right people. Will you accept?" "I'm thinking about it. It would be a way to honor Ellie's memory, helping other children not to lose their siblings as we lost each other." She looked at him, studying the expression on his face. "The question is whether you would be okay alone here." Lawrence laughed, a sound that had become more frequent in recent months. "Emma, this house will be full of children in a few months. I would hardly be alone. You know what I mean." He put the cup aside and took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "If you want to know if I would be okay with you living in Portland during the week and coming here on weekends, the answer is yes. If you're asking if I support your decision to pursue a career that clearly means a lot to you, it's also yes. And if I'm asking if you love me enough to wait for me to find my own path, instead of trying to keep me tied here out of gratitude or guilt." Lawrence turned completely to her, his grey eyes serious but warm. "Emma Sullivan, I love you enough to support any decision you make, even if it means leaving me. The love I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude or guilt. It has to do with admiration, respect, and a passion that grows every day." She felt tears forming in her eyes. In the month since that terrible night, her relationship with Lawrence had evolved slowly, built on complete honesty and mutual respect. There were no more secrets between them, no more lies or manipulations, just two people who had survived a terrible trauma and found love amidst the ashes. "I love you too," she said, "more than I thought it was possible to love someone. Then accept the job, follow your calling. I'll be here when you come home." "Home," she repeated, savoring the word. Throughout her life, home had been an abstract concept, a place that existed only in her imagination. But now, looking at Lawrence and the mansion behind them, a mansion that would soon be filled with children's laughter instead of echoes of tragedy, she finally understood what the word meant. "There's one thing I have to tell you," said Lawrence suddenly, seeming nervous. "Something I discovered last week." "What is it?" He pulled an envelope from his pocket, yellowed with age. "I was cleaning out my mother's belongings, preparing to donate everything, and I found this in her private safe." Emma took the envelope, immediately recognizing the delicate handwriting on the front. "Ellie Blackwood, for my little sister if you ever find her." "She knew," murmured Emma. "Ellie knew I existed." "Read it," Lawrence encouraged gently. With trembling hands, Emma opened the envelope and unfolded the 2 sheets of paper inside. The letter was dated 3 weeks before Ellie's death. "Dear little sister," the letter began, "I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, but I need to write in the hope that it will. My name is Ellie, and I am your older sister. We were separated when you were only 2 years old, and not a day goes by that I don't think of you. I discovered where you are living through a private investigator, but I didn't have the courage to make direct contact. How to explain 20 years of absence, How to ask forgiveness for not having fought harder to stay with you. If you are reading this, it probably means that something has happened to me. I am involved in a dangerous situation, trying to expose crimes that have been committed by the family that adopted me. I know it's risky, but I can no longer live in silence while innocent people suffer. I want you to know that you have always been my inspiration. Every time I thought about giving up, I remembered the brave little girl I knew in the orphanage, who always protected the smaller children even though she was too small to protect herself. That courage gives me strength to do what is right. If something happens to me, please don't seek revenge. Seek justice. There's a difference. Revenge consumes the soul, but justice heals the world. I love you, little sister. Always have. And, wherever I am when you read this, I will be proud of the woman you have become. Forever your sister Ellie. P.S. I included my favorite handkerchief. Our biological mother embroidered it for me before she died. Now it's yours. Emma finished reading with tears flowing freely down her face. Lawrence pulled her into a careful embrace, letting her cry on his shoulder. She knew she was going to die, murmured Emma against his chest. And yet she continued fighting. As her sister would do, said Lawrence, kissing the top of her head, as you did. They stayed like this for a long time, embracing in the garden as the sun slowly set over the ocean. The lighthouse began its nightly rotation, sending beams of light over the dark waters, a vigilant guardian that finally had something beautiful to protect. Accept the job, said Emma finally, raising her head to look into Lawrence's eyes. But with one condition. Which? I want you to come with me sometimes. I want you to meet these children, to see how you can make a difference in their lives. She smiled through the tears. Ellie said to seek justice, not revenge. I think helping orphan children is the most perfect form of justice I can imagine. Lawrence kissed her softly, a kiss full of promises and new beginnings. It sounds perfect, he said. It sounds exactly what Ellie would want us to do. As darkness descended on Blackwood Manor, for the first time in 2 decades, it was a darkness full of hope instead of secrets. And in the garden, 2 survivors planned a future built on love, redemption, and the eternal memory of a brave woman who had given everything to do what was right. 1 year later, in the first spring that Blackwood Manor welcomed as a home for orphaned children, Emma was in the garden watching Lawrence teach a group of boys how to fix the engine of a small boat. The sun filtered through the scattered clouds, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced on the green grass that now grew where before there had been only thorns and dead plants. "Aunt Emma, look what I found," shouted Sophia, an 8-year-old girl who had arrived at the center 3 months ago. She ran through the garden holding something shiny in her small hand. Emma knelt to be at the child's height, smiling. "What is it, my love?" Sophia opened her palm, revealing a small silver pendant in the shape of a heart. "It was buried near the lighthouse. I think it's treasure." Emma's heart leapt when she recognized the pendant. It was the necklace that Ellie wore in many of the photographs they had found. It must have been lost during one of her walks to the lighthouse, remaining buried for more than 20 years until a curious child discovered it. "It's very beautiful," said Emma, taking the pendant delicately. "But I think I know whose it is." "Whose?" "A very special woman who lived here a long time ago. A woman who also believed that children like you deserve to have families and homes full of love." Emma cleaned the dirt from the pendant, revealing a small engraving on the back. "Courage is love in action." "Can I keep it?" asked Sophia, hopeful. Emma hesitated for only a moment before placing the necklace around the girl's neck. "Of course you can. But promise that you'll remember what it means." "What does it mean?" "That you are brave, that you deserve to be loved, and that there will always be someone here to protect you." Emma kissed the child's forehead. "Now go play. Lunch will be ready in an hour." Sophia ran off, the pendant gleaming in the sun against her yellow t-shirt. Emma watched her join the group in the garden, where 15 more children played under the supervision of 3 caregivers that she and Lawrence had hired. The center had become exactly what they had dreamed, a place where children who had lost Their families could find safety, love, and most importantly, hope. Several had already been adopted by loving families, and those who remained knew they would always have a home there. Lost in thought? Lawrence's voice made her turn. He approached, cleaning his oily hands on a cloth, but his eyes shone with the satisfaction of a job well done. Just thinking about how things have changed. She leaned against him, still amazed by the fact that she could touch this man freely, love him without guilt or secrets. A year ago, this house was full of ghosts. Now it's full of life. And laughter, added Lawrence, embracing her by the waist. Did you hear Pedro trying to tell jokes during breakfast? I think he has potential. As a comedian, Emma laughed, remembering the 10-year-old boy who had arrived shy and frightened 3 months ago, but who now led the other children in adventures through the garden. He asked if you can teach him to drive the boat next weekend. I already. Said yes, father figure and all that. Lawrence kissed the top of her head. Speaking of which, Dr. Mitchell called today. About the new case? Yes. 3 siblings separated 5 years ago, the older ones vaguely remembering the baby who was taken to another city. Lawrence paused, knowing how these stories affected Emma. He thinks we can help reunite the family. Emma nodded, feeling the familiar mixture of pain and determination that accompanied her work. In recent months, she had become a specialist in cases of separated siblings, working not only as a social worker, but as a consultant for other professionals throughout the country. Her own story with Ellie had become a symbol of hope for separated families. I'll call him tomorrow. We need to act quickly before the children are moved again. Together or apart, we'll solve this. Lawrence turned her to face him. As we always do. Together, she agreed, smiling. It was her favorite phrase now. During the entire first year of their relationship, they had faced each challenge together, each trauma, each moment of healing. Couples therapy, individual sessions, long conversations that lasted all night working through guilt, grief, and the complex love that had grown between them. There's something else, said Lawrence, suddenly seeming nervous. Something I've been thinking about for weeks. What is it? Instead of answering, he moved away from her and knelt right there in the garden, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The children noticed the movement and began to approach curiously, forming a semicircle around them. Emma Sullivan, said Lawrence, his voice trembling slightly. A year and a half ago you entered my life like a storm, revealing truths that I didn't want to face, forcing me to be a better man. You taught me that true love isn't about possession or control, but about mutual growth and shared purpose. Emma felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. The children whispered excitedly around them, and she could see some of the staff approaching, discreetly to watch. You took a house full of ghosts and transformed it into a home full of love. You took a man broken by guilt and helped him find redemption through service to others. Lawrence opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring with a solitary diamond. You honor your sister's memory every day and make me want to honor hers too. Lawrence, she murmured, barely able to speak through the tears. Will you marry me, Emma? Will you build a life together based on true love, complete honesty and dedication to helping other people find their own families? For a moment the garden was completely silent, except for the sound of waves breaking against the rocks and the distant rotation of the lighthouse. Then Emma knelt on the grass in front of Lawrence, took his face in her hands, and kissed him with all the passion and love she felt. Yes, she said against his lips. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. The children exploded in applause and shouts of joy. Sophia ran to them, Ellie's pendant swinging on her neck, and threw herself into the arms of both for a collective hug that soon included all the other children. As Lawrence placed the ring on Emma's finger, she looked around the garden full of children laughing and playing, at the mansion that had been transformed from a mausoleum of secrets into a sanctuary of hope, and at the lighthouse that now guided not only ships lost at sea, but lost souls in search of home. She would be proud, said Lawrence softly, following her gaze in the direction of the lighthouse. I know she is, replied Emma. I can feel it. That night, after the children were asleep and the mansion had quieted, Lawrence and Emma walked to the lighthouse hand in hand. The white structure rose majestically against the starry sky, its light constantly rotating, an eternal sentinel. Over the dark ocean. "You know what I'll miss most when we move to the new house?" asked Emma, referring to the smaller house they had bought in town to have a private space away from the center. "What?" "This view. The lighthouse." She leaned against him, watching the light sweep the horizon. Ellie was right. It's like a protective guardian. "We're not moving far away," Lawrence reminded her. "Just to town. We'll still work here every day, still sleep here some nights when necessary." "I know, but it won't be the same." She smiled. "Though I suppose that when we have our own children, they'll want to come here to play with the other children." "Our own children," repeated Lawrence, savoring the words. "Have you thought about how many?" 2 or 3. "Maybe 4 if we can adopt some of the older orphans that nobody wants." Emma turned in his arms. "Would you be okay being the father of a large family?" "Emma, I would be okay being the father of however many children you want to bring into our family, biological, adopted, or just children who need a safe place to stay." Lawrence kissed her forehead. "After all we've lost, every family we can save or create is a miracle." They remained like this for a long time, embracing under the lighthouse's glow, planning a future built on the ashes of a tragic past. In the distance, the waves sang their eternal song, and Blackwood Manor, now officially renamed Ellie Sullivan Center, rested in peace, finally fulfilling the purpose for which it had been destined. When they finally returned home, Emma stopped at the entrance to look one last time at the hall where it had all begun. But instead of the blood-stained staircase that had haunted her nightmares, she saw the children's colorful drawings hanging on the walls, small shoes lined up at the entrance, and the distant sound of peaceful breathing coming from the rooms upstairs. Love had won, justice had been done,